Now we can have a look at the Saamic languages. If we go back to the genealogical classification that we looked at, we see that the Saamic languages are all the way here at the left. And this classification is actually also more or less a geographical one, because the Saamic languages are the westernmost Uralic languages, whilst the Samoyedic ones here on the right are also the easternmost ones. So if we look at our map of the Uralic languages, we have here the Saamic languages spoken in the very west of the area, in Scandinavia, in Finland, and on the Kola Peninsula of Russia. Now, the Saamic languages are usually divided into 10 languages. Before, they were often seen as just dialects of one Saamic language or one Saami language, but nowadays they're usually seen as 10 different languages. In a bit more detail, here in the south, numbered 1, we have South Saami, then from there on northwards we have Ume Saami number 2, Pite Saami number 3, Lule Saami number 4, North Saami number 5, and here I'd like to mention that of all the Saami languages, the majority of speakers speak North Saami, so maybe 90% of everybody who speaks a Saami language speaks North Saami. All the other ones are relatively small languages in comparison. The number 6, spoken only in Finland, is Inari Saami. Then here on this map, number 7, Skold Saami, number 9 here, Akkala Saami, number 8, Kildin Saami, and number 10, Ter Saami. This map, however, is a traditional one, so if you look at Skold Saami, number 7, the light green one there, most speakers nowadays live in Finland and not in Russia. They moved from the Soviet Union to Finland after the Second World War. And nowadays in Russia there's maybe only 10 or 20 speakers of Skold Saami. There's also other things which are not really, which don't conform to reality. So if you look at Ter Saami here at number 10, there are no speakers of Ter Saami in that area anymore. If there are any people still today who speak Ter Saami, they will all live in Lavoser or they're in the Kildin Saami area. And also, if we look at the very large area where the South Saami is spoken, it's true it is spoken in this area, but of course it doesn't mean that the whole area shown here is full of South Saami speakers. With maybe 500 speakers, it would be more correct to have a few small areas or dots where South Saami is spoken. Another thing which nowadays is a bit different, that for number 3, Pite Saami, all the speakers today live in Sweden. There's no speakers on the Norwegian side. There's a lot of maps, different maps for the Saami areas. They're interesting to look at. This one over the language map here, there's a map of the municipalities in Sweden, Norway and Finland that recognize Saami as an official language. Now this is from 2015, so this can change over time. You'll also see that in Russia, where Saami is an official minority language, this is not recognized at municipality level, so that's why it's not shown here. This line also here, this shows more or less the area of the traditional Saami homeland, Saami in North Saami. And here you see another map of it, and here you see, for example, that it also goes down all the way to the Bothnian Gulf. So as this area is not at the moment a recognized political entity, there's also a lot of difference in the various maps you can find of the area. If we have a look at the numbers of speakers, as I said, most speakers of a Saami language speak North Saami. South Saami has about 500 speakers, split evenly between Norway and Sweden. But then there's also languages which have very few speakers. these are all estimates, so they are in this range. Sometimes it's better to say less than 10 or less than 50 or between 1,000 and 500 or something like that. These are all estimates. But you see that there's great differences in numbers of speakers of the various languages. If we line them up differently here, we see North Saami, the biggest one, with about 20,000. Next comes Lule Saami with probably already less than 650. Then South Inari, Skald, Kildin, and then we get to languages which have very few speakers, which are then very much endangered. For Akkala and Tersaami, it's not known if there's speakers at the moment anymore. Here I've added abbreviations for where these languages are spoken. So N stands for Norway, S for Sweden, F for Finland, and R for Russia. And the size is also an indication, more or less, of where the majority of the speakers are. So Lule Saami spoken more in Sweden than Norway, while South Saami is more or less evenly split. North Saami, most speakers in Norway, then fewer speakers in Sweden, and even fewer in Finland. Now, if you if you list these languages again in the list of numbers of speakers of all the Uralic languages, we see that they are sort of at different levels there. So North Saami is in it with slightly bigger languages in the tens of thousands of speakers, whilst the other languages are in the group with many fewer speakers, so less than 1,000, where you could still divide these then into a group with sort of hundreds of speakers and a group with tens of speakers. What also must be taken into account if we talk about the area here is that there's many people who are not Saami in the area, so the Saami are a minority in their own homeland. So at the top, Russians in the Kola Peninsula, because of the city of Murmansk there, and also the military, so many people live there. Norwegians also nearly 1 million, lots of big cities here. Sweden also more than 500,000. Then, only then do you get the Saami themselves. And then there's also speakers of meänkieli, a Finnic language closely related to Finnish, spoken in the north of Sweden. The Kvenes, who also speak a language closely related to Finnish in northern Norway, and the Finns themselves in Finland. If we then have a look at the languages themselves, first of all, there's the endonyms, so the name of the languages themselves. Now, there's one thing to keep in mind, that usually when speakers of a Saami language talk themselves in Saami about their language, they use just the word Saami. So there's no need to specify that it's north or south or whatever variety it is. And that's occasionally confusing, because also there's dictionaries, for example, of North Saami and Finnish, which are then called a Saami-Finnish dictionary, whilst it's actually North Saami. So occasionally Saami refers to all the languages together, and occasionally it also can refer to one specific Saami language. So they are not always differentiated. Another thing that there tends to be a split, both a linguistic and a geographical one, into West Saamic and East Saamic. In West Saamic you have South, Ume, Pite, Lule and North Saami, where South, Ume, Pite and Lule are sometimes subsumed under Swedish Saami, even though South and Lule Saami are also spoken in Norway, Ume and Pite Saami only in Sweden. Then you also have North Saami with 3 varieties, 3 dialects still, which are often mentioned: Sea Saami on the Norwegian coast, Finnmark Saami in Finnmark in Norway inland, and Torne Saami, which is basically southern North Saami, so the Saami bordering on Lule Saami in Sweden and Norway. Now, I've used uppercase here for languages which have an official orthography, and lowercase for languages that don't, so Ter and Akkala Saami. East Saamic, then we have Inari Saami, as I said, spoken only in Finland. Then sometimes subsumed under Russian Saami are Skolt, Akkala, Kilden and Ter, even though Skolt is now spoken mostly in Finland. And then still subsumed under Kola Saami or Saami of the Kola Peninsula, Akkala Saami, Kilden Saami and Ter Saami. So the Saamic languages, they form a dialect continuum. So from central Scandinavia, where you have South Saami, further north all the way to North Saami, and then east towards the east of the Kola Peninsula. So a dialect continuum where neighboring varieties nearly always understand each other relatively well, but there's a main sort of split between North and Inari Saami. We also have to remember that even though traditionally these languages bordered on each other, nowadays very often this continuum, so the connection between the various Saami languages, sort of split by speakers of other languages, so Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, and Russian. Typical features in the phonology, there's a series usually of palatal consonants, there's affricates, there's voiced and an opposition between voiced and voiceless consonants, and there's consonant gradation, but consonant gradation is less in the southern languages, so this decreases from Pite downwards until South Saami, where there is no consonant gradation. But in the other languages, it's a bit like in the Finnic language, even though it affects many more of the consonants. The morphology, typically Uralic, is agglutinating. Nouns, relatively small case systems with less than 10 cases. They differ per language. 2 numbers, singular and plural, although pronouns can have a dual as well. Possessive suffixes, even though in many of the languages they are being lost. And verbs, 3 persons and also 3 numbers, so also a dual. And as can be expected in the syntax, there's a strong influence of the majority languages, so Swedish and Norwegian in Scandinavia, Finnish in Finland, and Russian in Russia. Now, an example, consonant gradation in North Saami here. So you have this, for example, the strong grade here in the nominative in these words, and in the genitive accusative, which looks the same. There's the weak grade, so johka and joka, or chahti and chasi, for example, for water. Maybe looks familiar to people who have learned a Finnic language. Possessive suffixes here, so interesting to see all these existing forms also with the dual, so a large number of forms here. For example, for my brother, for our brother if there's 2 of us, and for our brother if there's more of us. As I said, in some of the languages which had a dual, this is also slowly disappearing due to influence of the majority languages. Case suffixes, this is a nice example to show the differences between the various Saami languages. So Pohte, reindeer, Poatsu, North Saami, Poats and Kilden Saami, the same word, obviously, it's very similar, but we see here that, for example, whilst South Saami still differentiates between the genitive in N and an accusative in M, in North Saami they have coalesced, and there's one form for both of them, as in Kilden Saami. Then again, South Saami differentiates between the inessive and the elative. In North Saami, they don't exist, but they have coalesced into a locative, which then obviously South Saami doesn't have. Similarly, the essive and commutative in South Saami there's one form, in North Saami there's 2 different forms, but in Kilden there's also one form, so a similar development at opposite ends of the dialect continuum. The abusive still alive in Kilden, but not anymore in South Saami or North Saami. I found a nice example here of a sentence, a bit an odd sentence, but a sentence in all the 10 Saamic languages, the same sentence with the meaning, I heard that grandfather did not know that little bird that came through the rapids. So, strange sentence, but it has been specifically constructed in order to show the similarities between the languages here. Here's the Finnish translation as well. It's from a Finnish source. And here we can have a quick look and compare a number of things. So, for example, orthographies, we see here the purple Kildin is the only one which is written in Cyrillic. It's the Saamic language of Russia. Akala and Ter, they have either no speakers anymore or very few, and they've never been written. They've never had their own orthography. So that's why they're here in grey. And you see that the southern languages, they have also a number of graphemes or written forms of letters that they have borrowed from the majority languages, so from Norwegian or Swedish. So this O with the little circle, for example, for O, whilst North Saami doesn't have that. It has here hacheks for the j, and here this Old Norse looking form. The Skolt Saami also has a letter with an O with a tilde as in Estonian. So you see that the orthographies are not similar of the various languages. If you would write Lule Saami with a North Saami orthography, then you would see that they are a bit closer than they maybe look, that the orthography makes them look more different than they are. We talked before about the division or the split between Western and Eastern Saamic, and this is based on a number of sort of phonetic differences. So an old post-alveolar fricative sh in front of a consonant has changed into a palatal approximant j and a fricative h, but has remained unchanged in the Eastern languages. So here you see nicely South, Ume, Pite, Lule, and North have one form with this j or I, k, h, I mean, whilst in the other ones the esh has been kept or remains. We can also look at some other things. For example, here the first person suffix in the verb I heard is an M in South Saami and also Inari, and then in the other Eastern languages, except that in Kildin it's been lost, while in North it's developed into an N, and here in Ume, Pite and Lule it's changed into a V, whilst there's also South Saami dialects where there's a B, so you see the connection there. Something similar you see, for example, in South Saami has an accusative M, the old Uralic accusative suffix which you still find in Mari and Mansi and Selkup, Kamas, Nenets. But in the other languages this has changed. So in Ume, Pite and Lule it's changed to a V, or in the other ones it's disappeared. So that's a slightly different division in a sense. It would be between Lule and North. Another division between Lule and North is this one here, where negation in the past tense, where person and tense are expressed in the negative auxiliary in the red languages, so in the south, from south to Lule, whilst in the north only person is expressed in the negative auxiliary, and then for the lexical verb a participle is used. So the red languages are in a way more Uralic. They're similar to the system in Livonian, South Estonian, Mordvin, Mari, Permic, and so on, whilst the blue system that you have in North, from North to Ter, is a bit like the Northern Finnic system, from which it's probably been borrowed.